Hey, in this video we're going to see how to properly use the Voxel tool. And for that there are a few things we need to know and do. The Voxel world is made of two parts, the procedural part and the manual changes. The procedural part is computed locally on each computer using those shared parameters here. The manual part, which includes manual sculpting and painting, cannot be computed by its very nature and has to be sent entirely. So if you do a lot of changes, the amount of data to share can become very large, like megabytes or gigabytes. This is much too heavy to be transmitted on the same channel as the other YAG data and has to be sent through a new different channel. So when creating a server, YAG is now also starting a second server dedicated to the Voxel data and listening on its own port. The server is managed by YAG. It is automatically and silently started when you create the regular YAG server, clicking on this button. You can change the Voxel server port here. It will be used when starting the server and will be sent to the clients. But there is one thing that can't be automated because it has to be done outside of YAG. This port has to be reachable by the clients. So the player running the server has to ensure this port is reachable on his or her computer, which generally means configuring some port forwarding on your local router. To be clear, nothing needs to be done on the clients. This happens only on the server, okay? The details on how to configure port forwarding depends on the router, of course, so I can't make a specific tutorial, but the general principle should hold worldwide. So I'm going to illustrate it on a screenshot from my own computer, my own router. So if you open your router, you should look for a section named NAT for network address translation, and in this section you will see a bunch of rules and you need to create a new rule. This rule has to be activated, obviously. The name doesn't matter. I called it YAG, you can call it Voxel, YAG Voxel, Gendo, whatever. What's important is that the internal port and external port are the same, and obviously they should be the same as the port configured in YAG here. Okay, so those three numbers should be exactly the same, right? Then the protocol has to be TCP, and the equipment should be your computer as it is identified on your local on your router local network. All right, so you have to do that. If you don't do it and this port is unreachable, then the computed part of the Voxel terrain will still work fine, no problem here, but the manual changes will not be seen by the clients. All right, so and again, this is necessary only on the server. The clients have nothing to do. Okay, right. Another important thing is that manual modifications like sculpting and painting can only be done by the dungeon master and on the server. So this creates a new constraint in YAG. If you intend to sculpt or paint the terrain, the dungeon master has to be on the server. So in short, when you're the server and want to modify the Voxel, don't forget to first allow the Voxel port on your computer, and second, check the dungeon master box here in the setting panels. Okay, right. So now that everything external to YAG has been set up, let's see how to create and modify a Voxel world. The goal here is not to explain how the UI is organized. That will be detailed in a separate video. I just want here to give you some very general principle on how it works. So the most general rule is that when you make any change to your world, you have to apply it to validate and send everything to the clients. So it works very much like the dungeon, change and apply, okay? But because recomputing a whole world can take time, up to a few minutes sometimes, I made two different apply buttons here. Okay, the big one is applying everything. It will recompute the world and send all the parameters and manual changes to all the clients. The small one is not recomputing the terrain. It only sends all the manual changes to the client. So when you modify some parameters here, the terrain needs to be recomputed and you have to use the big one. But when you made only manual changes, like sculpting or painting, and you don't need to recompute the terrain, then you can use the small button to spare some time and resources on every computers. The next important thing to understand is this field here. It displays the number of computational tasks going on. When this number is positive, you know that some voxel computation is still running. When it's 0, like here, you know that all tasks are finished and the world is ready. So let me show you an example with the desert here. Okay, so I'm selecting a preset here, which will choose its corresponding parameters, and when I want to apply, I click this button, and you can see that the world is recomputed, and you can see the 100 tasks that are ongoing and that are decreasing, and when it's 0, the world is finished here. Okay, and we can start to visit our desert. Okay, let's come back to the default one, and you can see that it's much faster because the terrain is much simpler, the function is very simple, there is no foliage and so on. So depending on the size of the terrain, of the complexity of the function used, and on the presence or absence of foliage, the time can go up from a few seconds to a few minutes. Okay? Now, another essential things need to be known. If we mistakenly set up a world too big for our computer, which I'm going to do right now, you can see I'm setting up a very large world and running the computation. You can see we have several 100,000 tasks here. So if we mistakenly set up a world too big for our computer like now, sometimes the number of tasks may be huge and decrease quite slowly. This tells us that the computation will run for a very long time, and we don't want that. First because of the time, obviously, but also because more probably at a point all the memory will be consumed and the game will freeze or crash well before the end of the computation. So we have here a safety emergency stop button to destroy the voxel world and stop all ongoing computation tasks. As a security, we first have to enable the button before clicking it. So we just check this box, the button turns red, and when I click the button, you can see that it will destroy and reset everything to restore peace on all the computers. Okay, so let's come back to the default here, and we're good to go. Finally, one last very little thing. You can see that some part of the UI gets grayed depending on the chosen computers. When an area is grayed, like those one, it's disabled. I cannot click, I cannot change it, and it just means that it's not relevant for the current set of parameters. For example, you can see that depending on the noise we are choosing, let's take a cellular noise here, you can see the set of parameters that we can modify is different. Okay, let's come back to a different noise, and we have a bunch of things available and a bunch of things that are disabled here. Okay, so alright, I think this is pretty much it. We've covered the very general and basic properties of the voxel tool. I hope this was useful. Thanks for watching, and bye.